my great pleasure to welcome you all today to the Senior IT Executives Forum. I'm Kaushal Chari, I'm the Chair of Information Systems and Decision Sciences Department. It's quite a mouthful. In short, we produce MIS majors that many of you hire. So we are very delighted to have all of you attend this Senior IT Executives Forum. And before I proceed further, I just want to recognize our new incoming dean, Moise Limaya. And he's also a techie, he's also an MIS professor. So he understands our lingo, our language, and we're delighted to have you here. This event has been organized to coincide with the visit of Dr. Narayana Murthy, who is the CEO, former chairman actually of Infosys. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. So this event was organized to coincide with the visit of Dr. Narayana Murthy, who has been the chairman of Infosys for a while now, Chairman Emeritus. And we are delighted to have distinguished panelists here. And I will introduce our moderator today, who is Nancy Markle. Nancy Markle is actually the former CIO Americas of Arthur Andersen. And she was past president of Society of Information Management, SIM, that's the acronym, and a long-time board member of Asolo Repertory Theatre. And prior to retiring, Markle has been a consultant, global innovator, and CIO of Fortune 100 firms and organizations. Her more than 30 years of expertise is in innovative technology, strategic planning, organizational assessment, transformation, business and technology alignment, project management, governance, metrics, and all the stuff that CIOs and senior IT executives have to worry about. So it's a pleasure to welcome Nancy Markle, and I hand over the mic to her.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, then the little mic is working. Okay, what I thought I'd do, if this is okay with you, is introduce panelists one by one and give them a chance to tell you a little bit about themselves and the work that they're doing. And then we'll start with a series of questions and then open the floor to questions that you all have. Does that sound okay? Okay. So what I'm going to do is start with Rick, who is to my right. And how many of you have read CIO Magazine? Okay, well, Rick is one of the top CIO 100s for the implementation of Pricewaterhouse's voice over IP. So one of the largest and probably the largest to date. So 32,000 employees of Pricewaterhouse have been put on voice over IP. So if you have any questions, he's the guy. He is the Chief Technology Officer of PricewaterhouseCoopers and is responsible for the United States and the UK. So he deals with providing technology leadership in applications, infrastructure, and he is responsible for enterprise architecture, technical design, governance, and the IT processes. Before he joined PricewaterhouseCoopers, he was with the legacy firm Coopers & Lybrand, which is part of the merger of Pricewaterhouse and Coopers & Lybrand. And he was responsible for the technology infrastructure being merged, which is no easy task. And before that, he was with IBM for a number of years, and he started with IBM in their internal IT department as a systems programmer from the bottom up, and then moved into the marketing organization and then into consulting engagements. So he has a lot of experience in technology, and not only is he a technologist, but he is the manager of the Tampa Bay Little League. So I give you Rick.
Now, I've been with PwC about 19 years. We are, I always joke around a little bit and say, for an organization that really hasn't, it's been doing the same thing for about 130 years, right? Auditing public companies. We are as entrepreneurial as you could ever imagine. We are organized into 3 different business units. We have an audit business, which we audit, right, companies. We have a very large tax business. And we have a sizable consulting business, which is actually our biggest area of growth at this point in time.
Next is Stephen Pratt, who is the worldwide consulting partner for Infosys. And a very interesting thing about Stephen is that Consulting Magazine has listed him among the top 25 consultants in the world, both in 2003 and in 2005. He is also part of the World Economic Forum and has been from 2004 to 2008 and a part of the conference board for the same period. Infosys has been voted the most admired Indian company for the last 10 years by the Wall Street Journal. And they have pioneered global delivery model that he will tell you more about. He is a leading business consultant for more than 25 years and established a record of innovation in the industry. And it'll be very interesting to hear what he has to say about the consulting model that Infosys uses. He is their global head of consulting and systems integration and prior to that spent 12 years as a senior partner at Deloitte Consulting, where he established that company's CRM practice. Before that, he worked for 8 years for Booz Allen. So I give you Stephen Pratt.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. Thanks for coming, everyone.
That's not
working. Okay. I'll pretend it's working.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting time in business and technology, and in my experience, that the possibilities that are created today by the innovative application of technology to business is really creating distance between the leading companies and the ones who aren't changing as fast. And I think that especially what's happening right now around analytics and data is horribly interesting. It's very, very interesting, and there are so many things that companies need to pay attention to in technology right now that directly link to business strategy is critically important. In fact, when we came to Infosys, one of the reasons I went to Infosys to start Infosys Consulting is because I felt that the consulting profession was broken in two fundamental ways. The first was that there was this separation between strategy and implementation. And I remember my 8 years at Booz Allen doing a lot of strategy work, which I affectionately call the give advice and run away model. And then there was the implementation side, which really didn't have a strict linkage to business strategy. And I think that by combining those two things so that every program has a direct linkage to its impact on the competitiveness of the company is critically important. And so I think the whole right brain, left brain thing is critically important. It cannot be just about technology. It has to be about the intelligent application of technology to solve a problem. So that was one thing that was broken. The other thing that was broken is that consulting had become very expensive and had not taken advantage of the fact that there was global telecommunications and you could access global talent around the world. And so we went in and I think we're successful at disrupting the consulting market by being the first at scale to apply global delivery of talent to high-end business consulting programs. And so to me, that's been very exciting, and we're on that journey right now.
Thank you. Now the last but not least, of course, is Nigel Fennick. Nigel is with Forrester Research, and he serves CIOs, focusing on CIO as a business leader, influencing business strategy and performance. His research focuses on transformation and technology strategies, social technology, and the technology trends. Prior to his role as an analyst with Forrester, he was with the UK's National Computing Centre, NCC, and prior to that with Reebok in the UK as a member of their executive board in the role of Executive Director of Management Information Systems, in other words, their CIO. He has been very fortunate to lead a lot of sales and marketing for a number of companies, including a company that he founded based on e-commerce research for businesses. He also ran a GPS fleet tracking system and used that as the basis for commercial vehicle fleet management. You can go on the internet and find out a lot more about Nigel, and when you have a chance, I suggest you ask him about his blog because it's fascinating. He has a couple of recent publications that you also might find fascinating, and they're on the Forrester website. One is CMOs, Chief Marketing Officers, Must Merge Marketing with IT to Win in the Digital Decade, and Forrester's IT and Marketing Partnership Readiness Model. I give you Nigel.
Thank you, Nancy. And it's a pleasure to be here today and with so many great people in the audience. You know, I kind of want to echo what Steve said in terms of the shift that's been going on, and I've been fortunate to have a pretty broad and varied background, both in IT. I came into IT from consulting, so I didn't really have a technology background, and so I was one of those CIOs that came into the role without that technology expertise. But I was able to bring a different slant to that, which was understanding business. And I actually got out of IT just before the dot-com boom, which was really bad timing, come to think of it, and went into technology sales and marketing, which actually wasn't so bad timing, and really learned a lot about running a business and put that into a few startups that came after that. So what I brought, or try to bring to the research I do with CIOs today is really understanding of, what it means to drive business strategy and effective business strategy with technology. And how do you create that linkage? How do you create the connection that Stephen was talking about between the things that a business needs to be able to do to achieve its goals and how you use technology to get there and drive business value out? And that's really what I'm focused on with my research today, and working with a lot of CIOs to try and to drive that forward.
Well, thank you very much. What is the role of the CIO of the future, and how is it different from the CIO of today?
All right. So this is a really interesting question, and one that comes up a lot, and we're asked about it by CIOs and CEOs. And there's a definite shift that we see going on with our clients, and that is almost a split. For CIOs, we're going one way, that are really managing the technology and just keeping the lights on, trying to make a very efficient and lean operation, keeping the costs down. And I think this is partly driven by the CFO focus on driving cost out. And there is another sort of opposite side of the CIO spectrum, where CIOs are really looking at trying to drive business strategy and being involved in the business strategy setting. And there, the CEOs are expecting CIOs to be able to step up and show leadership in what it is that's possible to do in the business. And so we see this sort of split happening, and there are some CIOs that are welcoming that and trying to move into that more strategic role. And there's others that are much happier just keeping the lights on, keeping costs down. Either's good, right? It doesn't. One is not better than the other, and it depends on what the organization expects. Because if the organization expects low cost, keep the lights on, and that's the nature of the business, then that's okay. But there's certainly a lot of CEOs that are looking for a lot more than that now, and that connection to drive the business. So we see the shift happening toward more strategic CIOs.
Steve?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think, I actually think the concept as it's currently constructed as a CIO is a completely antiquated notion. And it was probably a good idea 10, 15 years ago, but today makes no sense. I think that there's really, right, similar to what you're saying, is there's two CIOs. There's the Chief Infrastructure Officer, and that person should worry about the networks, making sure people get computers, making sure that there's electricity in the buildings, making sure the air conditioning works, making sure there are facilities, all the infrastructure of the company. And there's the Chief Innovation Officer, which should be a greatly expanded role that should not only include technology and new applications of technology, but also best practices and the person that pollinates best practices across an organization, right? So that if there's good ideas in supply chain in one business unit or one geography, that person's responsible for doing it somewhere else. And to be able to look at the leading edge of technology and say what are the possibilities created by the advancement in technology. I think it inevitably will go that way, because I think it's absurd right now that you're expecting one person on one hand to talk about what's the impact of personalization and mobility on the business, and then the phone rings and says, hey, the server went down, right? And we're at 99.9% availability versus 99.95% availability. And I mean, that I think you need to separate those two things.
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything, Rick?
I would just like to second that. I actually think you need to force the separation, right? We kind of joke around in my firm that, you know, you come in as the CIO and then you're put in this very tight box, right? And I think all of us do, right? We all get in and we see the economic times not being great, right? Little hinted at improving and it flattening out. So this box we're in around cost containment, right, just seems to get smaller and smaller. And if you don't actually go forward and propose a way out of that, you know, they put you in a box and then 3 years later, you know, they'll fire you for staying in that box, right? So you need to propose that whole thing. And I do think you separate the role of keeping it running, driving that cost out, but reinvesting in the other side, right? If we don't find ourselves leading the business, you know, all of our CEOs will find that they'll fall in love with someone from the outside, right, who will come in and tell that story, right? But you can't let either go, right? So I always say take one of the old-time CIOs, put them in charge of the old stuff, right, driving the cost out, and put more of a business person. I actually don't think that Chief Innovation Officer or the new CIO, I don't think it's an IT person, unless it's a very special person. Mostly it's an IT savvy person from the business.
So it's kind of like the CEO and the COO, or in academia, the president and the provost type of situation, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
I think there's also, you know, there's a key point here, and that is the role of the CEO. Right, so we often don't forget that the CEO has a key role here, right? So if the CEO's expectations they're always going to be set by their past experience. And if their expectation is that the CIO is just somebody who keeps the lights on, then you have to do something to change that, right? I mean, if you want to be a strategic influencer, you've got to figure out some way of making that shift. So that's earning trust and doing all the basics right will get to be able to, you know, earn that trust to make that shift in the mindset of the CEO. And that's probably the hardest thing to do. If the CEO's mindset is you know, the IT is about keeping the costs down, keeping the lights on, then that's a tough nut to crack, and that's the first thing to do, I think.
Speaking about keeping the costs down, in this arena of downsizing, how do you retain your best employees? Since you have the microphone again, Nigel, why don't you start?
Okay, so retention of employees. You know, we've done quite a bit of research around some of the best practices for companies on retaining high performers, and there's a whole raft of things to do. But some of the things that pop to mind that are better in terms of practices. Job rotation came out really highly. So something we don't necessarily think about, but not necessarily job rotation within IT, by the way, but job rotation across the business. So these senior high performers in IT are looking to become future senior executives of tomorrow, right? And that means, if you think about what we just said about the role of the CIO, they need to have business expertise. And so the best thing you can do to help them feel that you're investing in them is rotate through the business. So that's what I say would be probably my number one thing for them.
Rick, what's Price Waterhouse doing in that arena?
Okay, we could be a little unusual here. And actually a lot of you who are local, I'm not sure if you see the same thing, but are actually attrition rate is extremely low in the Tampa area. There doesn't seem to be a lot of people, leaving to go to other jobs. The challenge we have is really keeping the right people. IT has changed a lot. We talked about it, initially. I mean, outsourcing is prevalent. A lot of the larger firms in the area have gone through that. And now you need people with a very different skill set. Actually, most people who entered IT a number of years ago viewed themselves running a server or writing code. And a good number of those jobs, they're not here anymore, right? And you need to be honest with the people about that. They're still around, right? And they're still at certain companies, but depending upon where your company's going, right, they may not be at your company, right? So you actually need to help them get to the right place. You need to get them to understand that it's understanding the business that will make them more valuable, right? If they want to write code, you have to get them, depends upon if it's in your company or out, to a place where they can be happy, right? Career growth is very challenging, right? Because most of us have gone to flatter organizations. How many people are more than 2 or 3 steps from the top of the IT organization? So you do need to do the rotation, right? When a lot of us, I look in the demographics, when we all came into the industry, right, you knew what you were going to do next, right? If you were the best person in your group, you're going to do your boss's job, right? You did that, and you're going to look up again. That kind of hierarchy isn't in place anymore. So it's really about rounding out your skill set to be able to get into the executive levels. Our big challenge, I think, of all of us is that a lot of us have gotten rid of those entry-level jobs. So we're hiring people in who are tech savvy, right? But more business-focused, understanding of technology. How many of us really do hardcore technology anymore? I'd question we understand it more than we actually do it. So be honest with the people. Show them that you do have viable career opportunities that'll make them more valuable in the outside market. And I guess that's the key. Be honest, and they'll stay. You can't promise them a job forever. I don't think anyone looks for that. You can promise them really good skills. Get them good skills, have good training programs in place. We spend a lot of time and money on training at PwC. Everybody gets a couple of weeks training a year, and that's just kind of the formal. A lot of informal training as well. A lot of CBT-based training, right? A lot of mobile-based training that we've moved into that people are really, very fond of.
While you have the mic, Rick, you want to discuss the differences, if there are.
The mic really doesn't make any difference. I don't think it's working.
So. It isn't?
You just have to hold it a bit closer.
Okay. Wow.
Are there any differences that you see in the gender, behavior, opportunities, or pay?
Let me go to the final. The back 2, I don't see any difference in opportunity or pay. Behavior. I do see little subtleties in behavior. I find I've very senior level, both men and women reporting to me. I actually find my females are more direct with me, which I appreciate. Right? The males tend to beat around the bush a little bit. The females that work for me seem to be very willing to share their ideas more directly, and I think that's appreciated. I do see a change in the makeup of the population. So I talked about before, I think the jobs are changing. I don't think many people come in and work, start in 3rd shift operations anymore. Or help desk or the like. I think you do see more people coming in at, kind of in the PM space and the BA space. So I think that I've seen an equalization of males and females coming into the workforce in the IT space.
Yeah, I can. Do you want me to comment on
Sure.
both? I'll do both of those really fast. The first one on retaining people in a downturn, I think it's very important that a company makes a explicit choice about what kind of HR model they want to have, because bad things happen to HR when a downturn comes. Because the normal model is the organization is growing, and if the organization is growing about 15 or so% a year, you hire people at the bottom, they get promoted up, everyone's happy because they're getting promotions and raises, and there's career advancement. And if you're growing faster than 15%, you have to hire people at the top to keep everything in the pyramid in the right structure to keep it financially sound. When you hit a downturn, what happens is that if you're hiring people at the bottom and then promoting people up, you start getting top heavy, right? Because you're not hiring as much people, and people are still getting promoted. So you're faced with two choices. You can either stop promoting people, right, and don't give them pay raises, or you can say that what we're going to do is to keep promoting people up through the organization and take a very hard look at performance management and ask the bottom 10% or the bottom 5% to leave the company, right? And so it's an explicit choice, and different things work for different companies. If the relationship is mostly we give you job security and your good people stick around because of that, then you can go that way. If you're in a different organization where people are expecting pay increases and advancement, despite what the economic environment is because of their personal performance, then you need to go that way. And so it's really an individual choice for a company, but it's important that you retain your top people. I mean, that's, to me, the most important thing is you want to come out of the downturn with a higher level of talent than you went into the downturn. As far as gender differences, well, I mean, the facts would say that statistically in the United States that women make 77 cents on the dollar for every man, and that's pretty universal across professions, right? Including for the same kind of job, right? Same job, right? Gender difference, 77 cents on the dollar, and I think there was just a survey done. It was like for 255 of 256 professions, women were paid less, right? Except for, I think, butlers and nannies was the one where women were paid more. So there is the math and the statistics would say there is an issue. I don't think the issue is at the hiring level. I think it's pretty consistent. I think our ability to attract and retain women throughout their careers is critically important, right? And a lot of that has to come down to making sure that there is the flexibility during someone's life when some event happens, right? And this is happening more and more with men also. So it's, especially where I live in California, that we're starting to see it for both genders. Is you'll have a sick parent, or they'll have a child, or they'll have an illness themselves, or something goes bad in their marriage, right? And then you go through these life events, and at those points, a lot of people come and say, I have to quit, right? Because I can't keep up the pace of the job. And it's very, very important that a company is flexible during those times and say, listen, go take care of your life, take as much time as you need, come back, we want you back, right? And to have that flexibility, because otherwise, I mean, my observation over my career is then if you're very hard-nosed about it, two things happen. People will go through those things in their life, and you'll lose a lot of good people, and disproportionately you'll lose women. So I think it's very important to have that flexibility.
Thank you. The question for you all now: where do you think the United States ranks among countries of the world in terms of innovation? Any ideas? How many think we're number 1, 2, 3, 4,
Okay.
5, 6? One person, you're right. According to the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, the United States is now 6th in terms of innovation. And in terms of change, growth of innovation, we're at the bottom of the list of countries. So what can we do about that? What should the United States be doing to change that? Who has the mic?
I think this is the one
I don't
none
know,
of us wanted to
it was,
answer.
it was pretty close there, I think. We'll have to measure it off here. So I've given a speech at my son's high school class a couple times, right, on why it was posing a question to them, why should I hire an American? Why should I hire an American? I mean, I drew on the board that, well, the way I start the class is I say, okay, we're going to build a company together. What kind of company do you want to build? And I think one was a synthetic wool company. I don't know how they came up with that. And the other one was a shoe company. And I said, okay, so if you hire people in India or China, it'll cost you 1/6. Okay, maybe somewhere between a fourth and a sixth. And then if you hire someone in the US, it'll cost you a lot more. So we're designing this company and we're saying, okay, we're going to put the analytics in Russia and we're going to put the manufacturing in China and we're going to make the technology in India. And so what do you guys do? Why would I hire you guys? And it's amazing that they actually had some insights into why you should hire people from the US. And to me, it comes down to a sense of anti-establishment thinking, right? That people are not afraid to go against the system and people think for themselves, and it's sort of part of the American rebel spirit to say, I'm going to drive the next thing. It's about teamwork, that I'm very comfortable with teaming with other people. It's about connecting disciplines, multidisciplinary thinking. I think is critically important. In fact, I think it's very important for our universities to have multidisciplinary thinking, because if someone's just really good at one thing, I can find someone cheaper somewhere else, right? It's the people who draw the correlations between those things. So in my mind, and I've spoken to a lot of, especially business school deans, about the importance of multidisciplinary thinking, creativity, not just teaching people how to think, but how to think for themselves, right? Because I mean, I hire a lot of MBAs, thousands of MBAs. They come out and too many of them think exactly the same. I want the person who is, you're right, thinking completely differently, right? Because those are the people who are valuable. So I think our education system, it's very important for our education system. I think it's very important for companies to nurture that and not expect people to be robots and follow the norm. And I want to, we should have, embrace the rebellious nature in us. And because I'm concerned that if we say, well, we're behind in academics, so we need to be more like China. I completely disagree, right? We should be more like us, right?
Can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
So I think that's really true, Stephen. And I sort of want to follow up with a comment about some of the research we've done that really highlights, I think, a worrying trend, actually, that may account for why we're not as high as we used to be, right? So we used to be dominant in innovation in the States. And I think part of this is down to tolerance of failure. And when we are measuring our businesses on a quarterly cycle, and we're looking for performance, innovation requires failure, right? You can't innovate and continue to succeed time and time again. You've got to fail. It's inevitable. How we tolerate that failure goes a lot to driving the culture of innovation. If the message we send when a team fails is you're a failure and we're not going to promote you,
Right.
then we're stifling innovation, and that I think is a really troubling trend. And Steve talked about creativity. Creative people think perhaps differently than process-oriented people. They're often the people we need to innovate are big picture thinkers. They connect the dots with things and they get the aha moments. If you think about how you measure people in your organization, a lot of our employee metrics, the measures that we use to measure performance, are based on measuring effectiveness at process, effectiveness at doing things. Right? We measure people on how well they do things. That's not a great measure for creative people. They don't do things well. They're just not process-oriented people. So until we can think of a way to measure creative people differently, they're not going to perform as well in an organization that measures based on effectiveness of process. And by that nature, we're effectively managing out of the organization the most creative minds, because they're not going to succeed in that environment. So I think that's something we've really got to think about as to how we're measuring performance for creative people.
So you both have inspired the whole idea of how do you create, inspire innovation within a company. So we started on that track. Google now says 20% of your time to each employee can be spent on anything that you want to do. What can companies do to inspire innovation?
I guess I have the mic. I guess on that previous point, I do think, it's interesting when you were asking the question of where everybody thought we were, right? Almost everyone had their hands up much earlier, right? So I think from an IT perspective, if you think about the big shifts, right, what we would consider truly innovative technologies over the last few years, you would probably go to, I'm looking at all the iPads in the area, right? All the Apple stuff. I think you'd also go maybe to the social networking, which were U.S.-based, right, things, creations. Or it probably wasn't the first one, right? I think what we've probably done a decent job at, because it's lower risk, to your point, Nigel, is improving on existing ideas. So, and that's culturally, I think it's a lower risk. I think within the firm, I think Google has it right. We've probably all had innovation roles that we've created, right? So, I don't know if you guys said, I've always had an innovation role, or a small group, 2-3 people. All their job is to go think outside the box and throw stuff up against the wall and see if it sticks, right? And 2 to 3 years into that, you see how much is stuck. And if it's nothing, right, we go back to our traditional rating systems, and those people tend to get moved out. So I do think you need to take a little piece of everybody's job. What we've tended to do is we have innovation challenges, all right? So we've implemented some, kind of collaborative technologies, and we have different types of challenges, and it goes across the entire U.S. firm. So about 38,000 people get to go just post ideas, right? And it's low risk, right? It's kind of all upside. But it's that type of thinking. The people who are going to innovate are the people who are doing things day in and day out. It's probably not IT people, right? IT people are going to take stuff that's been done already and figure out, hopefully, how to put it in their environment. But the true game changers, I think, can come from anywhere. And you need to inspire that. You need to reward that. And I think, you see a lot of that. You'll see some of the crowd stuff, right, that's out there. And, so getting the ideas, casting the net as far as possible. Make it lightweight. 20% is a lot of time. I don't think any one of us can afford 20%. Well, it would be an additional 20%, right, into your job. Right. Not many people are willing to do that, to do it. So how do you make it very lightweight? How do you capture the idea and then pull the thread on that idea? And I think we as IT people can help that. There are some great technologies out there right now that you can implement, right, and throw it out to your entire firm. But small reward systems could be points, right, that add up to a year-end review. It could be, small cash or some things. We've tried all of them. Our responses, we tend to get 100,000 plus responses every time we do what we call an innovation challenge.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've done is create an innovation investment board. It kind of works like, it's supposed to work like a venture capital model. It's sort of semi-functional now, but we're working very hard to get it to work better. That anybody, anywhere in the company can come and actually write a proposal for funding for an innovation, and they'll get basically seed funding, and they have to have a proposal and the expected results, and they have a very limited budget, and then they have to work very hard, and we treat it just like client work. The people get utilization credit, and that's the way of doing, because I absolutely believe that especially with technology now, that the best ideas will come from the bottom, right, or from the middle, or somewhere other than the top, right? Because I think that's the most important thing, is to harness the intellectual property of that thing. I actually think from a university perspective, just because we're at a university, this is one of my big beliefs, is that the university admission system is ready for a major disruption, right? Much like, if you've ever seen the movie Moneyball, right? I mean, everyone's competing for SAT scores, right? And if you look at the correlation between SAT scores and the impact someone has, right? It's a very Chinese way of thinking, right? And so, I mean, just one observation like I've had is, if you look at the number of CEOs who are dyslexic, right? Who are very right brain, left brain, who score, I'm sure did not score well on their SAT scores. Is there another way of looking for that kind of talent to find out who should be admitted to universities? Because right now it's become so, right, old school, right, scouting for baseball, right, that I think there has to be a new way of looking for university admissions. I think, and if you do that, you'll have a lot of very successful alumni who will donate a lot of money to your university.
Just for what, interestingly enough, you look at all the big names, most of them didn't even finish college.
Yeah.
Right? They got their idea
Yeah.
a year or two in and then
Right.
left.
I'm not sure if that's the endorsement that.
Well, I didn't see any student age people.
One of the things that we have found that's common, I think, to both of what you just said was successful innovation companies like Google. They're going. There's an acronym I use to remember what they do, which is PACT, P-A-C-T, and it just the four things that you really need to have in place. One is process. You cannot get an innovation culture going unless there's some kind of process. So just throwing out a suggestion box, whether it's manual or electronic, getting ideas doesn't work unless you've got some process to take those ideas and turn them into something. So you have to think about what your innovation process is. The second one is advocates. None of these companies actually work well on innovation without having really strong innovation advocates. So you know, the executive team has to say, you know, this is something we care about, and we're willing to fund people that are going to drive innovation in the organization. The third thing is culture. If your culture is not right, it will never work. So part of the culture is doing things that Rick talked about, you know, rewarding innovation. It's about recognizing innovators come from across the organization. It's about being open to innovative ideas from across the organization. It's about having executive support for innovation, and you know, Google gives 20% time. Others have done that. I think it was 3M that started that. But whether you give a dedicated time or not, if somebody comes up with an idea, don't just say, okay, well, that's a great idea, we want you to go implement it. And when they turn around and say, well, okay, what resources are you giving me? You say nothing. Right? Because that's countercultural, right? The culture has to be, well, we'll give you some resources to help, or we don't expect you to do it on your own. We'll provide you with some support for doing this. So the culture is really important. And the last thing is technology. Technology shouldn't be the first thing, it should be the last thing. And there are some great innovation technologies around, and they'll help support the innovation process and drive things forward. But technology alone will not make an innovation culture.
So since you have that,
Oh.
and since you all have
So
started
want
us,
to hold on to the mic.
since you have started us on this road saying that innovation occurs within the organization or outside of the organization at all levels, what's the role of IT?
Well, I think there's two things. One is many IT organizations are large entities in themselves, and they can be highly creative organizations. So IT can be an incubator of innovative ideas within an organization if the IT organization is large enough. So Rick has innovators within IT, right? So that's a potential role for IT. And in fact, IT staff are working across the organization with people all over the company. So they're definitely a source of innovative ideas and helping to stimulate that. So I think that's part of the role of IT. The other part is making sure the technology is in place that needs to be in place. So whether that's the social technologies that help drive innovative ideas across the company, or a dedicated innovation platform, then that should be in place too. So IT, from an innovator standpoint, I think is a catalyst for innovation in the organization. And I think the CIO plays an essential role as an innovator on the executive team, bringing ideas about what technology can do to help drive the company forward.
I guess it's related to my point about the role of the CIO. I actually, whenever I hear IT organization, it sort of makes me cringe because it's missing the whole point, right? I mean, it reminds me when I first started at Booz Allen in 1984, there was the computer room, right? And there was one computer sitting in there, and then if you wanted to use a computer, you had to go into the computer room, right? And it wasn't ingrained in, right? They had one Macintosh and one, right, IBM PC, and that was it. And then the line started forming, right? And then they said, gee, maybe we need more than one computer, right? One each of these computers, and I think the IT organization really needs to split along those two lines: infrastructure and innovation. And the infrastructure organization needs to innovate in sustainability and cost reduction and efficiency and doing really cool things in that area. And the innovation department needs to not only hire people with technical backgrounds, but people with process skills, people who understand the business, and more of a consulting organization actually, and where they can spread ideas across the organization and the application of technology. Because to me, if it's just, we have a whole bunch of guys who know they have hammers, it's like, and they're going around saying we have hammers, and that's not what you need. I mean, what you need is someone who's going to say, here's how we can enhance your house or your building, or right, and so forth. I have a strongly held view that the whole concept of an IT organization is incorrect right now.
We
Sorry about that.
we pretty much, well, yeah. Thanks for that. I do think, so we could actually help enable and lead the business, but who in an IT organization right now probably is not viewed by the leadership of their company, right, as inhibiting transformation, right, rather than enabling it. We're positioned wrong. We're telling people why they can't use devices of choice, right?
Yeah.
We talk about consumerism. For those of you who've been around a while, like I have, this is nothing new, right? I mean, it's been around for 25 years. PCs really didn't become prevalent. We were using them to access mainframes or VAXs or whatever in terminal emulator mode, right? While consumers were figuring out how to actually get productive on it, right? Or small pieces of business. We need to figure out, and we need to figure out pretty quickly how to change that paradigm, right? To stop being the guys that say no, right, when these things come out in the market. So, I think we can be viewed as innovators by quickly adopting and figuring out how our business processes and our applications can utilize the latest and greatest technology, right? So if we can just flip that from becoming the no people to the people presenting business decisions, right? I mean, there are very valid reasons why probably half your organizations haven't fully deployed or fully embraced consumerism, right? Yeah. It's expensive, and it changes, right? You're making a bet, right? That what's hot today, right, may be gone 6 months from now. So you need to make that very reasonable argument to your boards that here's something we should bet on, and we should get the weight of the organization behind. Yeah. So it does come down to risk too.
Yeah, you actually made an interesting comment that actually I completely share, is that if you look at the evolution of technology in businesses, you look at the PC, right? It was mostly used by consumers first, and then when companies, right, when the employees absolutely demanded it, companies finally adopted it. Cell phones, right? Same thing, right? And now we're in social networking, right? That companies are being dragged, kicking and screaming into this. And I think the companies need to figure out, I think, to get more proactive and be, I mean, your employees will tell you and the consumers will tell you what technologies are coming. Analytics, right? If you look at pop culture right now, right? The pop culture, I mean, the amount of analytics that you see in pop culture and movies and all that is amazing. And so, I mean, this stuff is coming. All you need to do is, you know, watch your employees, watch your movies, watch the kids, right? That's what's coming to your company soon.
So Rick introduced the topic of the no environment where IT is perceived as saying no. But besides that, what are some of the barriers to innovation that you see in companies?
Me again. Cost, absolutely. Security, depending upon the business you're in, right? I mean, you know, I think we'll talk about your bring your own device. You talk about the newer devices, right? We only have certain mindsets. Now, we all, I'm sure, have legal departments as well, okay? Your lawyers, by the way, get paid by the hour mostly, so in case you didn't know that. So they're going to weigh in heavily. And we tend to think of the new technologies in the same paradigm as the old technologies. So you're only going to allow that device there when you can do everything that you've done on a PC to secure it. So when you have full disk encryption and you can do remote wipe and you can do all of these things, right? And it can't be hacked, is when most IT people will feel comfortable letting them in the enterprise. And, you know, so I guess really cost, security, and then an element of risk, right? Making a bad bet. Right? I had my Canadian firm, I think, deploy a whole bunch of playbooks. Right? Yeah, I called the guy up and asked him how that was working out for him. Right? So, because if you go along this road, you actually don't know the winner. And if you want to get in early or very early, right, whatever you choose as the new innovative technology may be gone a couple weeks later.
Yeah, I think those are right. I would also add speed of, I mean, if and I think you mentioned this before, if a company will say, we want to do these transformations, we want to change, you know, we want to reconfigure our supply chain and we want to do this, you know, for the shopping season at the end of the year. And they say, okay, well, maybe the shopping season 2 years from now, right, is how long it's going to take. So I think speed of execution and speed of implementation of new processes and technologies is a big rate limiting step right now. And
Okay, one thing,
yeah.
just to that.
Yeah.
I think on that, it's really, you know, and every CIO in the room will realize you have a huge install base.
Yeah.
Right, so getting off of that, right,
It's a big-
is
yeah,
challenging.
it's very
I mean,
hard.
saying
Yeah.
2 years would be great to go to a new supply chain,
Yeah.
right? So that's the other thing. I think it's really in the cost, but it's in the speed of execution, and then how quickly can you reasonably get there?
Right.
In the old paradigm,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I would just add to that I think the biggest barrier is culture. If you look at the companies that fail with innovation time and time again, their culture is not supportive of innovation. That's what I talked about before, about the things you do about culture. That's why we feature it so highly in what we talk about with clients, because the culture has to be right. And it's not about, you know, do we put a new iPad up? You know, that's new technology, but that's not necessarily innovation. Innovation is about changing the way you do business. It's doing something differently. And that has to be supported by the culture. If you don't have that culture that supports that, innovation will die on the vine.
So Steve, you mentioned before about the universities being tied to the SAT scores. What can universities do about providing students to understand a more entrepreneurial environment?
Well, yeah, I think once students are in the university, so I'm actually thinking a lot about the admissions process and how to do that. It's non-trivial, in how to do that. So I'll leave that one aside for right now. If I can figure that out, then I'll then that would be great.
The new dean would love to.
Yeah, exactly. So once students are here, I think the importance of having cross-discipline, integrated problem solving is essential. I mean, if you look at, when I went to engineering school at Northwestern, everything was engineering. And I had to fight really hard, as I was very interested in art history, and so I had to fight very hard for them to allow me to take art history classes. And if you look at today, I mean, actually at Northwestern, Dino Tino at the McCormick School is doing some very interesting things around joint programs between the medical school and the engineering school, and the business school and the engineering school, and even the Art Institute of Chicago and the engineering school. And the whole thing is about design, right? It's not so much just engineering, it's engineering plus context, and because that's when really great ideas come out. It's this multidisciplinary approach. So I think universities really need to fight their own stovepipes, right? Because universities are often by school, and everything is by school, and there's not a whole lot of, there's only superficial coordination between the schools. But real life is not like that, right? It has to be multidisciplinary, and I think to produce the best people, if you have an engineering school and you could have some engineering students with some business students with some people from the medical school, maybe, or from the law school or whatever, right, that you can come up with amazing things, right, and amazing breakthroughs. I think that's the future.
Nigel, you've been talking about how important culture is. Mobility has changed the way companies operate. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of mobility?
Sure. One of the interesting things that some of the research highlights is that it's not actually the younger generation that's bringing the mobility and social into the workforce. We tend to think of it as being the millennials that are bringing this in and driving this change. The biggest users of mobility and social technologies are actually the baby boom generation. People like us, many of us in the room anyway. So when you understand that, you can start thinking about the workforce in a different way, and thinking about how you deploy mobile technology. So you don't necessarily need to deploy the same technology to everybody. So understanding who needs to use what. So what we call social technographics. Understanding the types of things that people do and how they want to use them allows you to determine how to deploy mobile technologies in the organization in a cost-effective way. So rather than saying, okay, we want to give everybody an iPad, not everybody needs an iPad, right? Not everybody needs a laptop. So actually understanding the types of users makes a big difference to how people deploy them. And the integration of these technologies is changing the way we design applications. You all know that. As my CEO says, we're moving to the age of the app internet, where essentially applications are designed to coexist, sitting on the cloud and also running on a smart device like a tablet. And that, I think, has the power to transform so much in the world of technology that we're just scratching the surface. It's going to be a really exciting 10 years, I think, coming up.
Computer Associates just released a report, and in that report they say only 4% of CEOs previously had a technology background, and that the modern CIO, they're saying, do have business acumen and are aware of commercialization abilities. However, they lack the forum in which to be able to share with the customers and with their partners. How do we deal with that?
Well, I don't know where they get the data from. So any CIO that I can only speak from experience. When I was a CIO, I got out on the road and saw customers, and I don't know any barrier that stops a CIO from going out and talking to customers. There's no excuse for it. And every CIO should get out and talk to customers and meet customers. And that's, fundamentally, if you're doing that and you're getting out meeting customers, you're going out with the sales force, you know what's going on in the minds of customers, and that puts you on the right place to make those influential contributions to where the company should go. And I think it's every executive's responsibility to do that. I'm not sure what barriers they're referring to. I would say there are none.
You're sitting in the role. What do you think?
No, there's no barriers unless you let yourself get put in the box, right? If you live outside the box, then you should be looking. I mean, the world is changing, right? Our business is changing. You need to evolve the business model, and that starts with your client, with your customer. It's all about the customer.
Okay, well, I think, Steve, you mentioned analytics, and I know, Nigel, you talked about how analytics are becoming so important in our environment today. And a lot of people are talking about the big data. So what kind of a challenge is big data for you now, and how are you handling it?
You can go first.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think this is, to me, one of the most exciting things that's happening right now is around analytics, because if you look at the promise of information technology was that we would apply technology to give people better information, right? And that you could actually interact with this information. But if you ask most senior executives in companies, okay, you spent all this money implementing SAP or Oracle. Have you ever logged into it? Ever, right? Like 99% of them will say, no, we've never done it, right? Because it's just not something that is something that they would do, right? And because it's kind of hostile, and so the way information is shared right now is that let's say the chief operating officer is wondering what the sales forecasts are, or the sales information is in Asia, goes to the head of sales, who goes to somebody else, who goes to somebody else, who logs into SAP or Oracle, downloads it into Excel, puts it in PowerPoint, gets back on the agenda of the people, presents it back up, and then they get to the chief operating officer and says, here's your information. That whole thing takes about a month. If it's super fast, it's a week, right? And the person says, well, that's not exactly what I wanted, or you obviously can't drill down on stuff because it's a PowerPoint slide. And that's the status of information technology today, right? If we're really honest with ourselves. So I think the ultimate promise of getting the right information to the right people at the right time to make the right decisions is largely unfulfilled. Now, this latest advent of analytic technology about in-memory computing, which shoves a lot more analytics closer to the user, the combination of data visualization and business intelligence has, I think for the first time, made it realistic and affordable to actually create things that executives will log into, right, on whatever device they have, and be able to drill down on information, do queries and look at trends, and in a very visually appealing way, because I think that's very important. And I think this will happen. And you talk about, and I talked a little bit earlier about if you've ever seen Iron Man, the movie, or you've seen Minority Report, or you've seen Avatar, or you've seen, you name the movie now, and you see these people moving data, or if you watch CNN during election time, they have the magic wall, and right? Executives are starting to say, like, hey, where's my magic wall? Right? Where's my Minority Report thing? I want to be able to throw information around on my screens. And it's happening right now. So I think we're going to look back 5 years from now and sort of laugh at the way we consumed information today and say, like, we were in the dark ages. I think we're right on the edge of that revolution.
I think I agree, but I think there's also an element of big data that goes to the customer. And the power of big data is about changing the customer experience in real time. And there's companies doing this both in B2C and B2B. So the obvious ones in B2B are people like Amazon, who change your experience online without you knowing it. I mean, we all get a slightly different experience in terms of what we see on Amazon based on our profile. We don't know it, but it happens, right? Same with Netflix. Netflix is tuned to our likes and dislikes. So the experience changes in real time. When you can analyze data, that amount of data that fast, you can change the dynamic that's going on with the customer and create added value for customers. So that's one part of that key to big data. The B2B example that comes to mind is companies like Boeing and Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce, I think about 10 years ago, started doing real-time analytics on all of their engines flying around the world constantly, and sending that real-time down to their data center in Derby, and crunching that data and sending it straight back out to the airline's ground crews, so they knew before a plane landed that an engine needed maintenance. That allowed them to replace the parts on an engine, get that plane back up in the air faster. And airlines are paying for planes in the air, they're not paying for planes on the ground. And that is the ability to change the customer dynamic and create real value for customers. That's the real power of big data.
Now I'll be the cynic. No. Or the challenges, actually. Depending upon the business you're in, I think all the technology is coming for all of that in your structured data in the back-end systems, right? We're seeing that. If you're a company such as mine that has 95% of its data unstructured in distributed systems, that's the biggest challenge that I have, right? Because now I have to start reworking that from the ground up, right? How to get that unstructured data somewhere where I can get it, manipulate it, pull the data out. But the advances, I agree, on the structured back-end systems have just been tremendous over the last 5 years, and I think that's just going to accelerate as a lot of the vendors actually focus on that and tailor their systems to the high compute power there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult challenge. If you look at all the disciplines that need to come together to do analytics well, that you need to understand the underlying technology architecture. You need to understand the data design, the data structure, which is a very business-oriented thing. You need to understand data governance, which is really a governance issue within a company. You need to understand what are the important metrics that an executive should be looking at. So you have to understand business strategy, how a business operates. Then you need to understand data visualization. So you need an artistic bent of what is a visually appealing way or insightful way of interacting with data. And if you look at all of those things, there's no way a current IT department will be able to do that, right? Because if you say we are the information technology and we've hired a bunch of technology guys, there's no way you're going to be able to get that done, right? It has to involve all of those things, which is very multidisciplinary, and is a hard thing to do. But it's in the movies, so it's coming to a business near you.
Okay, this is the last question I'm going to ask, so we can open the floor to the audience. And this question has to do with social networking. There's data out now that says only 10% of the CIOs in the top 250 companies are actively using public social networks. And of that group, only 4 are writing blogs. So what should the CIO be doing in terms of social networking? Should they be managing content? How should it be managed, and how can they be a part of the organization in its usage?
Well, I could spend 2 or 3 hours on this topic, so I'll try and keep it short. How many people in the room actually blog? Okay, there's 4. All right, why don't the rest of you blog? I wonder. We can talk about that later. So here's the challenge, right? If you're not engaged in social networks, how are you going to be in a leadership position in the organization? How are you going to actually be able to explain to your CEO what social technology is about if you're not engaged in social technology? Blogs is probably one of the easiest technologies to engage with outside of Facebook and Twitter. But what blogging does is allows you to have another communication channel. Now, whether that's internal or external doesn't really matter. I mean, I'd encourage you to do external blogging. But internal blogging is something you should be doing, and something you should be encouraging your CEO to be doing. And I don't care whether you're in a regulated or non-regulated business. There are people and CEOs in regulated businesses who blog. So it's not impossible to do. The point is to get engaged, to get involved in social technologies in a way that allows you to understand what it can do and how you can potentially change the dynamic that's going on in your company to engage with customers. Because social technologies is all about a changing paradigm. We went through a paradigm shift probably 92 to 95 when email came out. It changed how we communicate as organizations. Was anybody in IT back in those days in the room? Yeah, so you guys remember, and our reaction to email coming out was, well, PCs and stuff, not for the corporate environment, and IT tried to stop it. But that shift changed how we did things in the organization. It allowed us to communicate differently, not only internally, but also externally with partners. Social technologies is exactly the same. It's a paradigm shift in how we as people communicate. And when we see it as that, we understand that that shift will happen regardless of what we do with technology in the organization. It's changing how we communicate internally and externally. And so we either learn to adapt our environment to that and embrace it, take advantage of it, or we watch other people go by and get ahead of us. I would encourage you to do the former.
Sure. I'm trying to remember the original question now.
To do with managing social technology.
That's right. Most IT folks and most legal people will go towards that we need to manage and we need to control social networking. So my personal position, one that's been communicated within the firm, and we are implementing social networking right now, actually, as we speak. We're going to do a lot more management by policy rather than hard technology, right? If you start going through and stripping out postings and the like, I mean, we have a very intelligent workforce, sure, all of us do. And there's certain things that, just even in your personal life that these types of technologies are made for, right? I always coach my kids, be very careful what you put up there, because everyone can see it, right, versus not. So, where we're heading towards is very much by policy with certain types of filtering, right? You want to have your usual profanity filters, and you can, because of the business we're in, we have to be very careful that we cannot have client information in there. Because not only is it, the client's not like that, and in certain tax practices, it's actually illegal. So we have to make sure that certain information, right, stays private. So we're going to do that mostly, with the exception of the regulatory things, through policy.
Yeah, my first reaction to the question is that's an oxymoron, is managing social networks, right? Most attempts to manage the conversation about a company have backfired big time, right? You can join the conversation, but trying to manage the conversation is, and this is mostly, I'm talking about if there's discussion about your company outside of, on social networking sites. How to wrestle with internal policies for social networking is it's amazing. If you look at it was the same thing with PCs, it was the same thing with cell phones, right? It was, it's social networking is right in the hot seat right now, but it's coming, right? Your employees are doing it. I don't know I guess there is a movie about it, right? So, right, you say 10 years from now, will companies, block all their employees from getting on Facebook? I don't think so. I don't think so, right? And can you control it? I don't, I agree with you. I think that managing through policy is the only way to do it, because to even think for a second that you can from a technical perspective block somebody from doing something is ridiculous. It'll take people 3 seconds to figure out how to go around your block, right? And so I think it has to be about policies and expectations for professional behavior and consequences if it happens. And you can do as much as you can about blocking it, but you know, what's to prevent someone from picking up the phone and doing the same thing, or from writing a letter, right, and mailing it to the New York Times, or, I mean, yeah, so there's nothing, it's we have this expectation that we're going to 100% block people from doing bad things, and I think that's a misnomer, right? It has to be about, we expect professional behavior, and there are consequences for doing it poorly, because companies are going to lose the, you know, measure, countermeasure war, right, on how to prevent people from doing things.
So let's flip it. Instead of talking in terms of how to prevent it or not,
Yeah.
many of your CEOs, unlike Mark Zuckerberg, but many of your CEOs are in their 50s and didn't come into a social networking environment. They didn't grow up with it. How do we encourage it and use it and foster it other than having an organization and marketing that's doing it? How do we make it a part of our culture?
Well, I'm not sure that age has anything to do with it, actually. I mean, if there's, you know,
History.
yeah, I mean, yeah, growing up, I mean, at this point, nobody grew up with it, right? It's just because it's such a new phenomenon. But I don't know. I think, I mean, you remember back when it was the cool thing that executives would say, I don't do email and I don't touch a computer because I'm sort of above that in computers. I mean, that was a big thing for a while, that senior executives were saying, you know, I never touch a computer. Now it's like, well, you should be fired then. right. If you're so out of touch with what's going on in the world, so I think people, it's the power of social networking to interact. It's not just, well, I guess social networking broadly defined as having such an impact on companies and the empowerment of the consumer, right? The consumers today almost have perfect information about a company before they engage, whether it's from Yelp or from your friends on Facebook or from any other review site, right? Was it Angie's List or whatever, right? They have all of these. I mean, when I go to buy something, you know, I buy a car, I know exactly how much they paid for it. I know exactly the reliability record. I know just about everything there is to know about that. If I want to go to a restaurant, you know, I can read about the last, right? So companies need to pay attention and to be good listeners and to get feedback, right? It's a great opportunity for companies to respond to feedback about what their customers are saying about them, because it used to be in the old world that if you served a bad meal and someone just said, I hate that place, and they told 10 friends, you would never know it. You just wonder why your business went away. But now you can go online and you can read it. And you can say, wow, we better do something about our whatever, right? You know, about our food to make it better.
I think the way you get your CEO on board is to recognize they care about pretty much one thing through a for-profit company. That's the bottom line, right? And so you have to connect it to the bottom line. And the best way to do that is to do what I call creating an aha moment, right? They have to have their aha moment where they see social technology as a strategy to increasing the bottom line. And usually that's by showing them other companies, what other companies are doing and how they're getting benefit from them. So, you know, whether it's getting them to talk to other CEOs or getting them to read case studies or whatever the latest book is on how social technologies is transforming the world, it's getting them to get to that aha moment. They have to see social as a game changer, which it is. But until they see it, they won't embrace it. And once they see it, they'll embrace it wholeheartedly. But you have to get them to see it and see it in the context of your business and what it can do for you. That's how you change their opinion on that.
I happen to be fortunate in that my CEO is incredibly bought in. And if you think about the business model we're in, and I know we're all in different ones, the average age in my firm is between 26 and 27. So, and we are entirely a people business. So the buy-in is at the top. There's probably only one group left that does not buy in. Anybody have any idea who that is?
Audit.
Huh?
Audit.
No.
No.
Security.
IT?
Security you can manage. The lawyers, right? Legal. They're probably it's the biggest concern, right? I think security and IT, I think we can get very comfortable by doing appropriate use type policies, right? I mean, we had a law in place, it was broken, you know, and there were repercussions. I think the lawyers, whose job it is to be, that's their job, right? Is to help us manage that, is where it is. And actually, when I do go and I do meet with a lot of CIOs and at times CEOs, and most of them seem to be very much there. They're very progressive. They just want to know how to move quickly and safely.
Yeah.
That's what they want to know.
Yeah. So I guess my response to that would be to the lawyers, I'm very worried that people are going to take our paper and write a letter,
Yeah.
and then
Scan.
we're going to, we're going to mail it in, so we need to ban all paper, right? Right. In fact, people might be calling newspapers about something, so we need to ban all telephones, right? We need to, in fact, we should do full body searches for everyone coming in and out of the building, right? And I mean, there is, the lawyer's job is to be in a position to say, "I told you so." Right? That's
I was going to make a snide remark.
yeah, that was pretty snidey.
No.
So,
But it's true. I mean,
so-
we wouldn't have
Yeah.
PCs or email, right?
We would not,
If the
right,
lawyers had
exactly,
driven that.
right, and
Because email can leave the firm.
We would never ask anyone to leave the company.
Oh, by the way, I
Right.
did say it'd actually be safer if we didn't have customers too.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just saying, at some point, it's a business decision.
Yeah.
The lawyers are doing their job, and they did generally give very good advice, but this is gonna happen.
Yeah,
It's gonna happen,
Actually-
right? And you can be last, or you can, and, you probably don't wanna be first. I mean, let someone else make some mistakes, but it's inevitable. There's nothing gonna stop it.
Yeah, I actually think that obviously our position, we're picking this up. I think a lot of the vendors have struggled taking the software and getting it into some form of business form.
Yeah.
Right, so now I think you're in that decision point once again of, which package do I implement?
Right.
Right? Do I go on premise? Do I go off premise? And
Make
am I
it
picking
disposable.
because if you're going social, it's consumerism, right? The users are going to decide if you've picked the right one. The users are going to decide if they like it, if it's easy, and all that stuff. And so I think it's just like anything else. You have to take a risk. You have to pick one that you think's going to, number one, survive.
I'd say make it disposable.
Yeah.
Yeah, pick one that you
It's
can
got to be
throw away.
it's got to be a 2-year
Yeah.
business proposition, because 2 years from now you will very likely, and we've taken that in the mobility space. Pretty much everything I've done is a 1-year ROI.
Yeah.
After that, I guess listen, the whole market's going to move on in a year.
Right.
So this $1 million I'm spending today likely will throw away.